only one of them can come out our regional winner. Is it going to be someone who has already had this long list of achievements and these first places, or someone to finally claim their first place?
We've talked about Paul and Chuppa so much, but for those of you that are just joining us once again, Paul Chua, 6-time regional champion, won the European International Championships back in April, top 4 of the World Championships in 2022, 2 other top cuts at Worlds as well, and he is rocking his signature Roaring Moon, which he also won the European Internationals with.
Yeah, the Roaring Moon doing so much, and we got to see the Amoonguss that caused a lot of trouble last time around, rocking that Rocky helmet. So something that if you attack into it, you're going to be taking damage in return. Looking at Chuppa Cross, though, we talked about the fact that he has not quite gotten that first place here in that Masters division, but has definitely come close on a lot of occasions, and these are still some very impressive accomplishments. We got the finalists at San Diego. That was our regulation event, and of course, being able to get those top 8s. And looking over at the team, a lot of really, really strong options.
Yeah, the team that Chuppa is using is the exact team that Simone Sanvito used to win the Lille Regional Championships in Europe just a weekend ago. And so piloting it to a masterful finish. These players went up against each other earlier today, and in those matches, Chuppa would go with Tornadus and Fluttermane as the lead, and Paul went with Fluttermane and Iron Hands, but I think the Fluttermane did not accomplish very much for Paul, so I expect Paul to adjust. If you want to counter Tornadus Fluttermane, I think Heatran is an amazing adjustment, something like Iron Hands Heatran, and I'm curious if Chuppa's going to go one step ahead, expecting an adjustment this time around, but it is the Tornadus and Fluttermane, so let's get this grand final started.
Well, already a change coming out from Paul's end in comparison to how it went down earlier. Right away, we're going to see that Iron Hands, but Heatran to be making an appearance.
The Heatran did not come out at all the last time these two players went up against each other, so I think it's already a fantastic adjustment, putting on a lot of offensive pressure, and we saw that the Iron Hands was able to survive a Fairy Terra Moonblast from Fluttermane previously. The way Chuppa approached this matchup, the first time they went up against each other was to just go for Bleak Wind Storms and deal a lot of damage, but I think Heatran is the perfect Pokemon to have out on the field right now, as it does not take that much damage from Chuppa's Pokemon.
Which is really, really nice, because I feel like, too, when you have these strong attackers combined with this potential of a Tailwind, that things can get out of control really, really fast. The Fluttermane, though, just wanting to protect, get past this first turn as the Tornadus goes ahead and gets up that Tailwind, making sure that these Pokemon are going to be extra speedy in the turns to come. Flash Cannon, attempt to be targeting into the Fluttermane, will just hit into a Protect. But a Wild Charge into the Tornadus, well, that is going to be doing a lot of damage. Critical hit, one-hit KO, all of the good stuff.
This grants Chuppa a free switch in. The speed control, I think, maybe not that essential for Fluttermane on turn 1, and it's really not that important for the Chien-Pao potentially in the back as well. So I think Paul off to a really strong start, just learning from the last time that they played against each other, and the Heatran adjustment, which I was just talking about, playing a huge role immediately because it's able to soak up more damage, whereas previously, Paul had gone with Fluttermane, and Fluttermane is just able to deal damage, but it also faints very quickly. So Chuppa now really has to make the decision, who do you want to switch into? We know there's Rillaboom and Chien-Pao in the back, and I think Rillaboom just does very little in this spot, so it's kind of forced to go into Chien-Pao, but I don't know, Iron Hands and Heatran here are just so bulky. If you want to get a knockout here, you're going to have to play super aggressively. It could be something like Fairy Terra, Fluttermane, Moonblast into Iron Hands, but Paul could retaliate back by going for a potential Terra with his Iron Hands, or he could just give up the Iron Hands saying, you know what, I'm happy to just get a Heat Wave off right now. I'm willing to trade damage because I took this early lead.
Plus, if you go for the Terra Fairy on to this Fluttermane, all of a sudden this Chien-Pao, I mean, sitting and staring down something that could be Drain Punching you could definitely be a really, really scary spot to be in. So definitely big decisions coming up from Chuppa in this turn. And I don't know, this could be a tricky one. Already, great call by Paul to be setting the momentum in this match.
Okay, no Terras, no switches, just Sacred Sword, and it gets the one-hit knockout onto Heatran with the critical hit. Oh, I think Heatran may have survived that without the crit, so that's game-changing.
Being able to secure that knockout, no pressure. This Heatran that could have been so problematic, and now can just hit some damage into this Iron Hand.
Oh!
It's not going to be taking the KO onto the Fluttermane. It's going to be surviving a bunch of recoil.
Wow, what a turn there. So I think Chuppa likely doubled up onto the Heatran with the Shadow Ball as well to guarantee the knockout onto that slot. It's a very defensive Fluttermane. It survives a Wild Charge even with the Sword of Ruin defense drop. Now, critically, Paul does not have the Heavy Slam that you often see on Iron Hand, so have to go for the Wild Charge option. But wow, Fluttermane able to even survive that. Now Amoonguss comes out, but you're threatened by a lot of damage, so what a great swing of events there. And without a Terror from Paul, he just takes so much damage without actually getting the knockout on the opposing Fluttermane.
Absolutely massive. Now, Paul. You got to be so careful at this point, and it's going to be the protect onto the Amoonguss, making sure the Icicle Crash from the Chien Pao is going to be null and void this turnaround. Now the Dazzling Gleam, it's not a choice specs Flutter Mane, so it can be swapping its moves out, and this has the potential to be doing more and more damage into this Iron Hands, being able to secure that KO. How many critical, this has been 3 critical hits that we've seen this match.
And there's no Urshifu on the field either.
What is this?
We're going to see the Landers as the final Pokemon. Now, this is what's tricky, right? Because Landers is essentially almost all of your damage. It is the Choice Scarf Landers. You've got Stomping Tantrum, Rock Slide, U-Turn, and Terra Blast. So part of the question is, what move do you commit to, right? Because Paul doesn't actually know what Chuppa's final Pokemon is in this position either. So yeah, I think Terra Blast is your strongest option, but what's so awkward about that is the Chien Pao right now still has that Focus Sash intact. And so will you be able to actually get enough knockouts quickly enough? I think the downside for Chuppa right now is that you have the Rillaboom in the back. So you know that your Rillaboom is not going to be very effective into this late game Landorus. And so it's a question of, can Paul deal enough damage with this Landorus across the board? If Chuppa just goes for something like a Shadow Ball, Icicle Crash, double up onto the Amoonguss, and that gets a knockout, then it's going to be a 3-on-1 immediately.
Yeah, and so it'll be super, super important here for Paul to be able to get some sort of momentum. No swap, we'll just see the Chastalization, put this into, of course, that flying type so that we can actually get that Terra Blast in the first place to be dealing all of this damage onto Chuppa's end.
All right. This is a really effective late game sweeper, but Chuppa hasn't lost that many resources with that Flutter Mane hanging on earlier. So Amoonguss is going to start this off with the Rage Powder to redirect any attacks away from Landorus. Icicle Crash critically does not miss, connects onto the Amoonguss, and it does so much damage, bringing it down to 64 HP. There's that double up play that we were talking about. Does that get the knockout? It absolutely does.
With the Rocky Helmet Amoonguss as opposed to the Citrus Berry, no chance at the recovery, so the double up is always going to be so safe, being able to get that KO. Now it's just this Landorus all by its lonesome. That'll be the Terra Blast into the Chien Pao. Not even near enough damage to even try and bring it down to that Focus Sash. So this position, I mean, the tailwind is done, but there's still just so much momentum lost.
Yeah, I think right now, if you're Chuppa, what you can do is probably just protect the Chien Pao, attack into the Landorus. You saw that Paul's actually making the read and ignoring the Chien Pao, maybe expecting a protect, but Chuppa has that Rillaboom in the back. So even if your Flutter Mane faints, you get the safe switch in into the Rillaboom, then you can click Fake Out plus Icicle Crash onto the Landorus slot. So I think Chuppa in a phenomenal position to take this first game after Paul had an amazing turn 1.
Yeah, just being able to eliminate that Heatran right out of the gate that otherwise looked like it might be a little bit tricky to be dealing with was just all of that difference. And now in this end game, it's going to be starting with the Flutter Mane going for that protect. Sucker Punch into this Landorus, of course, with that priority since we were readying up attack. Even if it was hitting into the Flutter Mane, sure way to be able to get this damage down.
That was a really nice play, and with Paul making the target onto the Flutter Mane, trying to make a prediction instead of the Chien Pao, I think he recognizes there's no way he can win. So a lot of different ways I think Chuppa could have played this end game, but by going for that, you get guaranteed damage off onto the Landorus before it's able to move. And now in a 1v3 situation, even if Landorus were able to correctly target every turn, I just don't think he can actually pull off the victory. But the key turn in this battle was the double up onto the Heatran, the Sacred Sword just getting the knockout, and then Shadow Ball getting redirected as well. And I think Paul had the opportunity to maybe Terra a little bit earlier in this battle, but I can see why he wanted to conserve his Terra, because this late game flying Terra with Landorus can be really effective. But you got to get a couple of more knockouts, and man, that Flutter Mane surviving Wild Charge even with the Sword of Rune defense drop, absolutely amazing bulk there, keeping Flutter Mane around.
Yeah, and that Flutter Mane being able to put up so much pressure. I mean, it was the Pokemon that was dominant for so long that is still out there, still doing a lot of work, but kind of a little bit more in the backseat at this point. But it was a really, really good showing to see exactly why this Pokemon was everywhere to begin with. And for Paul, I mean, we're in a position now where you got this lead, you're looking in a really good spot, but you have to still sit there and consider what needs to be changing going into the second match.
Yeah, I think what's also really interesting is you revealed your hand with the Iron Hands Heatran lead, right? And so Paul initially was leading Flutter Mane and Iron Hands when they had previously fought against each other earlier on in the tournament, but dropping the Flutter Mane outright in that previous one. And so if you wanted to take advantage and predict maybe Iron Hands plus Heatran as the lead, there of course is the Urshifu on Chuppa's side, which can deal massive amounts of damage, especially into that Heatran. I think Paul could also take a similar approach, but utilize Terra with Fairy Terra on Heatran, for example, a little bit earlier. Landorus also was actually a really effective sweeper. The problem for it is that it just was not able to win the game quickly enough because the resources were just so depleted on Paul's side. So yeah, I think you could run it back with the same core and just be a little bit more aggressive with the Terra early on instead of conserving it for Landorus all the way until the end game. And I'm curious if Chuppa maybe wants to make a lead adjustment here, predicting Heatran. You can bring out that Urshifu, but Urshifu, of course, still kind of weak into Iron Hands and Heatran and Terra, so we'll see.
Well, it's one game away for Chuppa to try and claim that regional title. Let's see if he can do it. Starting things off, we're going to be sticking with the same lead for both trainers. If it's not broke, don't fix it. We'll have to see where the play changes up on this first turn.
All right, so Fluttermane once again exerting a lot of offensive pressure, and Tornadus here once again can try to set up that Tailwind. Chuppa actually critically made an adjustment already. You can see that there's the Urshifu in the back instead of Rillaboom, and I think that already is a big deal. If that Fluttermane had fainted in game 1 earlier, late game Rillaboom doesn't match up super well against Landorus. So with Paul actually bringing the same 4 Pokemon in this matchup, as you can see on the side, that drastically, I think, improves Chuppa's matchup here. But turn 1 is still pretty difficult. I felt like Paul had a huge advantage after turn 1 in that previous game. So let's see how this one plays out.
Yeah, being able to get that Tornadus out of the way. I mean, at that point, right away.
He tried to read the Terra.
No, we see that play happen, but this ain't it. No Terra. It's going to be the Moonblast firing into that Iron Hands. The Flash Cannon dealing a bunch of damage in return, and since it was the attempt at the fake out, it's not going to be a proper double up into that slot to remove the Fluttermane from play.
Oh man, that's a big deal because the Iron Hands is just a tanky Pokemon. If you're able to remove it or just deal that much damage, it opens the door for this late game Champao and this late game Urshifu. So Paul trying to make an aggressive read, it doesn't pay off, and now Tornadus is even able to set up the Rain Dance for this late game Urshifu. Things are looking so strong, but does Dazzling Gleam KO Iron Hands? It will!
Iron Hands is eliminated from the game, and already the Urshifu poised to be this late game sweeper to be absolutely feared in this match. Heatran now targeting into the Torn slot as opposed to the Fluttermane.
Oh man, I think Chuppa is off to such a strong start in this battle. Paul making a really aggressive read. That's what he's known for, being willing to turn up the dial when it's needed, but Chuppa does not fall for it here. And Heatran just in a spot where it can continue to deal some damage, but Tornadus now can continue to go for Bleak Wind Storms. I think the main thing is, where do you target with Fluttermane, right? Your Tailwind is slowly expiring, but that's also not super important, and Fluttermane's able to just go for these Shadow Balls and deal consistent damage as well, and it's kind of a waiting room for the Urshifu in the back right now.
That's the thing. This is potentially just Urshifu's world with us all living in it. So either way, you ignore this Fluttermane and it can start doing some damage, or you take it out and this Urshifu gets the swap in to start exerting all of this pressure. So definitely a little bit of a tricky situation. And even the Torn, I mean, at this point too, you have set up your Tailwind, you have set up your Rain Dance. You can go for something like the Bleak Wind Storm to try and deal some damage, or even to taunt to try and shut some options down. The Amoonguss, though, not wanting to get taunted or to get hit. The Shadow Ball just going into the Protect, but it will be the Bleak Wind Storm. No connect on the Amoonguss. It will be safe, but it will be hitting into the Heatran, of course. Just a little bit of damage.
Yeah, that's a big turn for Paul there, because you're able to stall out a turn of Tailwind. You're able to not take any damage with the Amoonguss, and the Flash Cannon here will deal a lot of damage to Tornadus, but not get the knockout. So the way that Paul's playing this is staggering things so that you don't give Chuppa a free switch in, right? Because if you knock out that Fluttermane, it grants something like that Urshifu or like that Champao to just switch in immediately. Paul's approach is saying, okay, the late game Landorus Therian can be really good. I need to stall out your Tailwind. I also don't want to give you any more offensive positioning here. But Amoonguss now, of course, still at risk against the Fluttermane and the Tornadus, but Fluttermane here is going to opt for the Protect.
Yeah, just making sure it is going to be sticking around in case there is the target. We will hit the double Protect. Onto the Amoonguss, though. 1 in 3 chance in hitting it. So there's not going to be any taunt to be shutting that Amoonguss down on later turns after this Tornadus has been eliminated, as Flash Cannon will be firing into that slot finally remove it from play. No more potential of Tailwind setup in the future, and no potential for Taunt to be shutting down the Amoonguss.
Oh, Paul's doing a really good job of pulling off a comeback after making a really aggressive read on turn 1 and having it not work out in his favor. Like you said, no more Tailwind, no more ability to set up that Tailwind. That double protect prevents the Amoonguss from getting hit by that taunt, and that's a big deal because now it can continue going for disruption, right? So Heatran's putting in a lot of work. I do think this is a free switch in. You could go into Chien-Pao, but what's awkward is if you go into Chien-Pao, Paul can consider a Terra with the Amoonguss and go for that Water Terra. With Water Terra, you'll be able to survive a double up from the opposing side. So I think Amoonguss actually being able to go through all those turns and take no damage or get taunted means that it can go for a Terra and a Spore right now, which is so strong in this position. But if you commit the Terra to Amoonguss, that means no Terra for the Landorus Therian in the back.
And that's the big thing, because you do not have access to that powerful flying type Terra Blast if you've already used that Terrestrialization on anything else. So something to be definitely looking towards. The Tailwind might be expired too over on Chuppa's end, but we still have the Rain for, I believe, 2 more turns. But now Chien-Pao joining the field. This could also be a bunch of damage, but looking at a potential swap.
Did you see that, though? It's Amoonguss going out into the Landorus. Of course, if Ice Cold Crush just goes into that slot, that would be an absolute nightmare for Landorus to eat up. So, yeah, you see Paul maybe reconsidering things a little bit. Now, opting just for the Spore and Heatwave play. Okay, so a double up onto Amoonguss here won't just get the knockout, but Chien-Pao protects. It's not going to target down the Amoonguss this turn.
That could have been the safe swap, but I don't blame him not going for it. This will be eating the moon as though from the opposing end, as Heatwave will be, of course, hitting into that protect. Will connect with the Flutter Mane. Not enough for the KO because of that Rain, reducing the damage. And the Spore, of course, will not be putting the Chien-Pao to sleep thanks to the protect.
So if you're wondering why the Moonblast onto Amoonguss, the expectation is for Amoonguss to go for the Terra there, right? If you commit the Water Terra, Moonblast does so much damage, then the next turn you can double up onto Amoonguss. I think Chuppa gets out of the turn with a little bit more than the worst case scenario, because if the Spore went into Flutter Mane, it feels like it would be an absolute disaster. But Flutter Mane survives thanks to the Rain being up, and we are in this dance again where it's like, who do you double up onto if you're Chuppa? One good read could secure Chuppa the game right now, but last turn did not pay off that heavily.
And Paul Chua just slowly and slowly making his way
more
in
though,
here,
Sacred
but
Sword into Heatran, but it survives!
4 HP!
Oh, but he doubled into it!
Double into the opposing slot. The Amoonguss is safe, but at what cost? The Heatran is going down. Chuppa was just one big read away from claiming the match. That might have been it.
He is getting so close to the game now, especially knowing that Amoonguss committed that protect previously, but there is a Landorus coming out right now. And with Landorus, there is always a way, especially with that Choice Scarf Rock Slide. So the key decision this turn is what do you commit to? It looks like it's actually going to be the Terra Blast option. Okay, so saying, you know what, I've gotten the Intimidate. I don't really need to go for the Rock Slide flinches right now. And that's actually a really big deal because there is that Urshifu in the back. So even though Chuppa gets that turn correct, you do have the Intimidate now onto the opposing Chien-Pao. So will Chien-Pao be able to get a knockout with Ice Cold Crash? Here's the question.
It's not over until it's over, and playing to any out available in this game 2 of the finals to try and take it into this game 3 as that flying type terrestrialization coming through on the Landorus. Make sure that you do have access to those Terra Blasts to try and pave your way to history. The protect over on the Chien-Pao to try and buy a little bit more time on that slot as the Terra Blast firing into the Flutter Mane over on Chuppa's end will be taking that down.
This is such a tense end game here. Amoonguss getting that double protect earlier, putting it into a much better position. Spore there goes into the Chien-Pao slot, and Chuppa now gets a free switch in into his final Pokemon. And we all know what that's going to be. It's the Water Urshifu.
Urshifu, the Tower Master, looking to try and get another title of that regional champion here in Toronto. So close, one match away, and such a great adjustment heading into this game 2 as well. The pressure that this offers as opposed to the Rillaboom is absolutely massive.
Absolutely huge. So I think from Chuppa's end, you can consider going for that Terra on the Urshifu, take away the fighting type so that Terra Blast is no longer super effective. And my main question now is, does Terra Blast get the knockout? You've got the defense drop from the Chien-Pao, but I still would not expect it to actually get the knockout. So let's see. We know Paul's going to go for Terra Blast onto Urshifu right now. Okay, here it is.
Will it do enough damage to pick up this pivotal KO?
Not even close.
No, Urshifu holds on so well. Now the Ice Cold Crash, it will connect. Super effective hit, brings it down real low, and the Surging Strikes, well, that is just going to be enough to tip the scales over into Chuppa's favor.
Chuppa Cross has worked so hard for so long. One of the most consistent players in North America, especially in the last year. He's hunting for that first title, and I know he can taste it. There's no way an Amoonguss can pull off a comeback at this point, in my opinion. So, super, super close. That being said, this Amoonguss at least has Rocky Helmet, so if you Surging Strikes instantly Amoonguss, it actually does damage, and Pollen Puff actually does meaningful damage into Chimpo as well. So, babe, is there a world in which Amoonguss pulls this off? I said earlier, I don't think so, but with that Rocky Helmet, you can never count Amoonguss out.
You have to commend Paulo on playing to every single out that he has available to him to try at any cost to delay what we thought could be the inevitable here in this matchup. That Chien Pao finally sleeping, hitting that double deck earlier on, always trying to be scoring into the slot. That's going to be the first turn of Sleep Burn, and it is the potential world where those sleep turns could be all the difference. The close combat, not very effective into it, but what is going to be noticeable is that it's only going to be that one amount of chip from that Rocky Helmet into that slot, so making this a world where it looks like Chopper Cross will be able to get that title.
That was such a big close combat. I actually need to stress that, because if you click Surging Strikes, you actually just lose your Chien Pao, and then, or you lose your Urshifu, and then it's Chien Pao versus Amoonguss 1v1, and then if Chien Pao doesn't wake up, you just faint to 2 Pollen Puffs. But Chuppa correctly goes for that close combat, and Paul does not spore that slot either, so you'll be able to get another close combat off into Amoonguss. That did a lot of damage, but if it survives, that would be huge.
And here's the second turn of
Oh,
Sleep.
Chien Pao stays asleep.
From that Chien
Close
Pao.
combat onto Amoonguss. Is that enough? It is! Chuppa Cross gets the knockout, defeats Paul Chua, and claims his first regional championship in the Masters division after so much hard work.
One of the most accomplished players that we have out here without ever getting that championship title. And finally, it hit his. He had that second place. He's had those top 4s, those top 8s, and now he can finally add that regional champion title to his list.
Take a bow, Chuppa Cross. Congratulations, defeating Paul Chua, one of the winningest players in Pokemon VGC history. And you know, we were saying, okay, like this game probably is over, but yeah, actually the critical decision to go for close combat twice is so pivotal there. And Chien Pao does not wake up, but it's okay because the Amoonguss does not end up sporing or pollen puffing into the Urshifu slot. What an absolute crazy finish.